The wedding hall shimmered with golden lights that reflected off every crystal and glass. Music played softly in the background, the kind of melody that made everything feel peaceful and grand. Guests filled the long tables, dressed in elegant clothes, laughing, talking, and enjoying the celebration. Everything looked perfect from the outside, the flowers, the food, the laughter, but behind all that beauty were the people working hard to make it so. Among them was a young waitress named Lena. She moved quietly through the crowd, balancing trays filled with glasses of sparkling drinks. She smiled politely every time someone asked for something, though her feet ached from standing since morning. It was her third wedding that month, and though she was tired, she didn't let it show. The hotel manager had told the staff to stay professional no matter what. "Smile and serve," he said earlier that day, "no matter how rude they are. It's their day, not ours." So Lena smiled, even when some guests ignored her thank you or waved her away without a glance. She had learned to hide her feelings well, but tonight felt different. This wedding was bigger than most, and the guests seemed wealthier, louder, and a bit more entitled. Near the main table sat a group of people who seemed to enjoy being noticed. They laughed the loudest, spoke over the music, and demanded things impatiently. Among them was a man in his mid-30s, dressed in an expensive suit, holding a glass of wine like it was part of his identity. His name was Victor, and even from a distance Lena could tell he loved attention. She had just refilled his drink when he caught her looking briefly toward the corner of the hall. There stood a beautiful grand piano, shining under the soft light. It hadn't been played yet. The hired pianist was supposed to arrive later in the evening, but the instrument itself drew Lena's eyes like a magnet. She had always loved the piano, its shape, its sound, its quiet power. For a brief second she imagined herself sitting there, her fingers touching the keys again, the way she used to when life was different. She quickly looked away, realizing she shouldn't be staring at anything while on duty. But Victor had noticed. "You keep looking at that piano," he said suddenly, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "What, do you want to play it?" His friends chuckled. Lena froze for a moment, unsure if he was joking or teasing. She smiled politely and said softly, "It's a beautiful instrument." Victor leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Beautiful, sure, but can you even play it? Or do you just like how it looks?" Some people nearby turned to see what was happening. Lena felt the warmth rise to her face. "I used to play a little when I was younger," she replied, hoping that would end the conversation. But Victor didn't stop. "Used to, huh? That means you probably forgot everything. Tell you what," he said, laughing. "Why don't you give us a little show? Let's see if you can still play something." The people at the table started whispering. A few laughed nervously. It was clear the comment was more about showing off than genuine curiosity. The bride, sitting 2 tables away, noticed the tension and frowned slightly but didn't intervene. Lena tried to stay calm. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm working right now," she said gently. Victor shrugged. "Oh, come on, just one song." "It's a party. Let's see if our waitress can entertain us." A few guests murmured that it wasn't fair, but others egged him on, curious to see what would happen. The music from the speakers had stopped for a moment, leaving a strange silence between them. Lena stood still, her hands gripping the tray. Part of her wanted to walk away. Another part of her, the one that had spent years holding back her dreams, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to touch the piano again. In the middle of all this, she noticed someone watching quietly from across the room, the groom's father. He was an older man with kind eyes who had earlier thanked her for her service when she helped him find his seat. Now he was watching her with curiosity but not judgment. When she met his eyes, he gave a small nod, a gesture that felt like encouragement. Lena took a deep breath. She placed the tray on a nearby table and walked slowly toward the piano. The hall grew quiet. Even the servers at the back stopped moving. Everyone wanted to see what she would do. When she sat down, her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. It had been years since she'd played, since before her mother got sick, before she dropped out of music school, before everything changed. She had promised herself she'd find her way back to music someday. But life had other plans. For a few seconds, she didn't press any key. The silence stretched long enough that Victor laughed again. "See, I knew it," he said, shaking his head. "All talk." But then, without looking up, Lena pressed the first note. A soft, low sound echoed through the hall. Then another note. And another. Her hands began to move, slowly at first, as if remembering the path they once knew. The melody started to build, growing gentle and graceful. The room fell completely silent. The laughter faded. Conversation stopped. Only the piano spoke. Her fingers danced lightly, the music flowing out of her like it had been waiting all these years to be heard. The melody wasn't complicated. It was something she had written herself long ago when she still believed in dreams. It was full of emotion, the kind that didn't need words to explain. Guests who moments ago were laughing now sat still, watching her. Some looked amazed, others simply moved. The bride's eyes glistened as she leaned closer to listen. Even the children near the front stopped fidgeting and stared in quiet awe. Lena didn't look at anyone. She just played, forgetting the pain in her feet, forgetting her uniform, forgetting that she was supposed to be serving food and drinks. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. When the last note faded, the silence returned, deeper this time. No one knew how to react for a few seconds. Then someone started clapping. Another followed. And suddenly the entire hall was filled with applause. Lena blinked, unsure how to react. Her hands were still shaking slightly. She stood up awkwardly, murmuring a thank you, and turned to walk away. But before she could, the groom's father stood and approached her. "That was extraordinary," he said softly. His voice carried warmth, not pity. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She hesitated, unsure if she should answer. Finally, she said quietly, "I studied music for a while when I was younger. I wanted to be a pianist, but life got in the way and I had to stop." He nodded slowly as if he understood. "Well," he said, "life may have stopped you once, but clearly it hasn't taken the music out of you." People began to gather near the piano, asking questions, complimenting her. Some even wanted to know if she performed professionally. She smiled shyly, not sure how to handle so much attention. Victor, the man who had mocked her, sat in silence now. His smug expression had vanished, replaced by embarrassment. Lena didn't stay long. She thanked everyone politely and returned to her duties, though her mind was still somewhere else, back with the music. Every step she took after that felt lighter, as if the burden she carried had finally loosened a little. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests whispered about the waitress who played the piano like a star. The bride personally thanked her before leaving, saying her song made the night unforgettable. Even the manager, usually strict and impatient, looked at her differently, not just as an employee, but as someone who had brought something special to the evening. When the event finally ended and the guests began leaving, Lena stood by the back door, watching as the last lights dimmed. The piano still stood quietly in the corner, shining under the soft glow of the chandeliers. She walked toward it one last time, gently touched its polished surface and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the night air was cool. She walked down the empty path toward the bus stop, her tired feet aching but her heart strangely light. She didn't know that her moment at the piano had been recorded by a few guests on their phones. She didn't know that by morning, people would be sharing it online, calling her the waitress who silenced a room. For now, all she knew was that for a few beautiful minutes, she had remembered who she truly was, and that was enough. The morning after the wedding, Lena woke up to the sound of her alarm buzzing insistently. Her tiny apartment was quiet, filled only with the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sunlight sneaking through the half-closed curtains. She stretched her arms and tried to shake off the tiredness that had settled into her bones after the long night of work. Her feet ached, her shoulders were stiff, and her uniform smelled faintly of perfume and spilled champagne from the previous evening. She glanced at her phone, intending to check her messages quickly before getting ready for her next shift. That's when she noticed something unusual. There were dozens of notifications, calls, messages, and social media alerts. She frowned confused and tapped the first notification. It was a video, a short clip, maybe 30 seconds long, showing her at the wedding piano. She could see herself from a distance sitting at the piano, playing a melody she barely remembered learning. The camera wobbled slightly as if it had been recorded hastily by someone trying not to get caught. She froze, recognizing the moment immediately. It had been recorded by a guest, perhaps one of the ones who had been watching her performance with awe. Curiosity and nerves collided in her chest. She tapped play again, watching herself with the piano glowing under the golden lights. The music, delicate and emotional, filled the tiny speaker of her phone. Her fingers had moved so naturally over the keys, just as they used to years ago. Lena felt a strange combination of pride and embarrassment. How had this little moment been captured, and why was it online? She scrolled through the comments. At first, they were simple compliments. "Wow, so beautiful. I can't believe a waitress played like that." Then more comments appeared, each one more surprising than the last. People were sharing the video, calling her talent amazing, inspiring, and even magical. Some users were speculating about her background, trying to guess where someone could have learned to play like that. Lena felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined anyone outside the wedding would even know her name, let alone notice her music. As she sat there staring at the screen, her phone rang. It was her manager. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Lena, are you seeing this?" he asked, his voice mixed with excitement and concern. "Yes," she whispered, still staring at the comments. "I don't understand. How did this get online?" "It's gone viral," he said. "Everyone is talking about it. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Some people are calling you the pianist who stunned a wedding." Lena's heart raced. "Viral?" she repeated. She never liked attention. She liked quiet, safe spaces where she could do her work and go home without being noticed. The thought of thousands of people watching her performance made her stomach twist. "Don't worry," he continued gently. "Most people are amazed. You didn't do anything wrong. You just played beautifully. But I thought you should know. This is getting serious." After hanging up, Lena sat in silence, processing everything. The small apartment around her seemed to shrink as the news sank in. The wedding, the piano, her fingers moving across the keys. It all felt like a dream now. A strange dream that had somehow reached thousands of people overnight. She decided to check her social media accounts carefully. Her email was filled with messages, some from strangers, some from music schools, and a few from journalists wanting interviews. One message stood out. It was from a music academy she had applied 2 years ago, but had never been able to attend because her family couldn't afford the tuition. The subject line read, "We saw your video. Are you ready to play again?" Lena's hands trembled as she opened the email. The letter was polite and formal. It said that someone had sent the academy her performance from the wedding, praising her natural talent and skill. They were offering her a chance to audition, even sending her a small scholarship to help cover tuition. She read it over and over, hardly believing what she saw. A part of her wanted to delete it and go back to her quiet life, but another part of her, the part that had been silent for years, felt a flicker of hope. She spent the morning trying to process everything. The world outside her window seemed brighter than usual. Birds chirped, the sunlight felt warmer, and the wind carried a gentle promise she hadn't noticed before. She thought about her mother, who had always encouraged her to follow music even when life made it impossible. Lena closed her eyes and imagined her mother's smile, imagining the pride she would have felt seeing Lena's talent recognized at last. By the time she got ready for her next shift, she had made a decision. She would continue with her work, but she would also explore this unexpected opportunity. She didn't want to rush, but she couldn't ignore the chance to reclaim a part of her life she had put aside for too long. At the restaurant, the usual bustle of orders, clattering plates, and the hum of conversation welcomed her back. Her co-workers noticed her distracted expression but didn't comment. Lena moved through the crowd with her usual grace, taking orders and serving dishes. She smiled at the guests, her mind half on her duties and half on the possibilities that had opened overnight. During her lunch break, she found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone again. More messages had come in. Offers to perform at private events, compliments from people around the world who had seen the video, even messages from music enthusiasts offering guidance and support. Lena felt overwhelmed, but there was a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like the world was opening its doors to her. Later in the day, Victor's name appeared among the comments on one of the social media posts. Someone had tagged him asking if he remembered taunting the waitress at the wedding. Lena's stomach tightened as she scrolled down. There he was, the man who had mocked her in front of everyone, trying to act nonchalant but clearly uncomfortable. His comment read, "Didn't think she could play like that." Impressive. Lena let out a small, bitter laugh. The irony was not lost on her. The man who had laughed at her now had to admit he had been wrong. She didn't feel anger, not exactly. It was more like a quiet satisfaction. She had not only survived his ridicule, but had turned it into a moment that changed her life. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Every free moment was filled with messages, emails, and calls. Lena started responding carefully, making sure to balance her work with this sudden attention. She felt exhausted but alive, like she had been walking through a fog for years and finally stepped into the sunlight. One afternoon, she received a call from the music academy. A kind voice on the other end explained the next steps for the audition. They wanted her to play a few pieces, not complicated, but enough to show her skill and emotion. They also said they could help arrange travel and accommodations if needed. Lena listened quietly, nodding even though the person on the other end couldn't see her. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. That night she practiced in her small apartment. She hadn't touched a piano since the wedding, but the notes came back to her naturally. She started with the piece she had played at the wedding, letting her fingers move slowly, remembering the melody, the flow, the emotion behind it. Every note carried memories of her mother, of her lost dreams, of long nights spent wishing for something more. As she played, she felt a strange peace. The music wasn't just about performance or recognition anymore. It was about reclaiming a part of herself she had buried for too long. When she finally stopped, her hands were sore, but her heart was lighter. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to take. The next morning, she went back to work with a new sense of purpose. Guests noticed something different about her, not just her skill, but the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her. Even her co-workers commented on it, though they didn't know the full story. Lena smiled politely, not ready to share everything yet, but feeling a deep sense of gratitude for this unexpected turn of events. As the week went on, the video continued to spread. Local news stations even picked up the story, calling her the waitress who amazed everyone at a wedding with her hidden talent. Invitations to perform in small events started coming in. Lena read them all but decided to respond carefully, choosing only a few opportunities that felt right. She didn't want to be pushed into something she wasn't ready for. Through it all, Lena thought about Victor again. She realized that what had started as an embarrassing moment had turned into a catalyst for change. His mockery had forced her to step up, to face her fears and to remember the music inside her. She didn't resent him, not really. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of closure. She had transformed a moment of humiliation into one of triumph, and that was something no one could take away. By the end of the week, Lena had made her decision. She would audition at the music academy. She would take the scholarship if it was offered. She would play again, not for anyone else, not for recognition, but for herself and for the dreams she had once set aside. As she prepared for bed that night, she looked at her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. She saw the tiredness in her eyes, yes, but also a spark, a light that hadn't been there before. She whispered to herself, almost as a promise, "I'm ready. I'm ready to play again." And in that quiet moment, Lena felt the first real sense of hope she had felt in years. A hope that maybe, just maybe, her life was be. Lena spent the next few days preparing for the audition at the music academy. Every morning she woke up earlier than usual, making tea and sitting by her small keyboard in the corner of her apartment. She hadn't owned a piano of her own for years, and even this small instrument felt like a lifeline. Her fingers hovered over the keys, tentative at first. But gradually she began to regain her strength and confidence. Each note she played brought back memories. The late evenings spent practicing when her mother was sick, the quiet encouragement of her music teacher before she had to leave school, the thrill of performing at small local events that seemed so far away now. Lena allowed herself to feel those memories, both the happiness and the sorrow, and slowly realized that her love for music had never truly disappeared. She also practiced the piece she had performed at the wedding. It had been a simple melody, but it carried her emotions in a way nothing else could. She played it over and over, refining the timing, the flow, and the subtle touches that gave it life. She realized that even though she had been away from serious practice for years, her hands remembered. The muscle memory was there, waiting to be awakened. While practicing, Lena also thought about the sudden attention she had received online. At first, it had been overwhelming. Strangers praising her, sharing her video, and commenting on her story. She had never been one to seek recognition, and yet, This time it felt different. The attention wasn't about fame or wealth. It was about something deeper. The acknowledgement that her talent mattered, that her passion had value, and that her life could still change. She read through some of the messages people had sent her. Some were short, like, "You're amazing," or "So inspiring." Others were longer, sharing personal stories of struggle and how watching her play had made them feel hope. One message from a young girl named Lily said, "I stopped playing the piano because my parents said I wasn't good enough. But watching you play made me want to try again." "Thank you." Lena felt a lump in her throat. She never imagined that a small act, done quietly at a wedding, could touch people in such a profound way. The morning of the audition arrived, and Lena felt a mix of excitement and nerves she hadn't felt in years. She packed her bag carefully, making sure to include sheet music, a small notebook, and a bottle of water. She wore a simple outfit, nothing flashy, just enough to feel comfortable and presentable. Her apartment felt unusually silent as she stepped out into the early sunlight, the streets slowly filling with people going about their day. The academy was in a part of the city Lena hadn't visited before. The building was large, with tall windows and polished wooden doors. Inside, the lobby was quiet, the air smelling faintly of old books and polished wood. A receptionist greeted her with a warm smile and asked if she was here for the audition. Lena nodded, her hand slightly trembling as she handed over the forms she had filled out. She was led to a waiting area where a few other applicants were already seated. Some were older, some younger, each holding instruments or sheet music. They whispered quietly among themselves, glancing at Lena, who felt suddenly very small in the midst of so much talent. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she really ready for this? Could she still play at this level? She reminded herself of the wedding. She had played then in front of strangers under pressure, and she had amazed people. That memory gave her courage. Her hands might shake, but her music was still inside her, waiting to be heard. Finally, her name was called. A door opened, revealing a large practice room with a grand piano sitting in the center. Lena's heart pounded as she walked in, the polished keys gleaming under the bright lights. At the far end of the room, 3 judges sat behind a table, watching her with polite interest. "Good morning," one of them said kindly. "Please sit down and play whenever you're ready." Lena took a deep breath and sat on the bench. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. Then slowly she pressed the first key. The note resonated soft and clear. She began with a simple scale, just to warm her fingers and get comfortable with the space. The judges watched quietly, taking notes but giving her room to find her rhythm. Then she began the piece she had played at the wedding. Her fingers moved over the keys with confidence, the melody unfolding naturally. She let her emotions guide her, the memories of her mother, the struggles she had faced, the joy of finally reclaiming a part of herself, all poured into the music. The room seemed to disappear around her. All that existed was the sound, the flow of the notes and the story she was telling without words. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then one of the judges smiled, leaning forward. "Beautiful," she said. "Your timing, your emotion, your touch. It's clear you have a deep connection with the music." Another judge nodded. "You have a natural talent that is rare. Have you been studying seriously for a long time?" Lena shook her head. "I studied as a child and teenager, but I had to stop when my family couldn't afford lessons anymore." "I haven't practiced seriously in years." The judges exchanged glances. "Even with that gap, your skill is remarkable," one of them said. "It shows that you understand the heart of the music, not just the technique." "That's what makes a musician truly special." Lena felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over her. The nerves that had gripped her moments before melted away. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not just for the music she could play, but for the story behind it, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the love she had for her art. After a few more questions and a brief discussion about her plans, the judges thanked her and told her to wait in the lobby while they deliberated. Lena sat quietly, trying to calm her racing heart. She could hear other applicants playing softly in the rooms nearby, but her mind remained focused on the audition she had just completed. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the door opened. One of the judges stepped out with a smile. "Lena," she said, "we would like to offer you a scholarship to study here. We believe in your talent and we want to help you continue your journey. We hope you will accept." Tears filled Lena's eyes. She nodded, barely able to speak. I don't know what to say." "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," the judge replied kindly. "Just play. Keep sharing your gift. That's what matters most." Walking out of the academy, Lena felt like she was floating. The streets looked brighter, the air fresher, the world suddenly full of possibility. She thought about the wedding again, about how a moment of courage had led her here. She remembered Victor's mocking words, the laughter of the guests, and the silence that had followed her music. That moment, which had felt humiliating at first, had turned out to be the spark that reignited her dreams. Back at her apartment, she called her mother's old friend who had always encouraged her to pursue music. She shared the news, her voice trembling with excitement. Her friend listened quietly, then said softly, "I always knew you had something special. Lena, you just needed the world to see it." Over the next few days, Lena continued her work at the restaurant, but everything had changed. Her colleagues noticed the way she carried herself now, a quiet confidence replacing the old hesitance. Guests commented on her smile, her presence, and even asked about her music. Lena responded politely but kept most details to herself, savoring the news and the sense of possibility quietly. She also began preparing for her first official class at the academy. The thought of studying music seriously again, of learning new techniques, of playing with other talented students, it thrilled her. She practiced diligently, refining her pieces, and even started composing small original melodies inspired by her life experiences. One evening, as she walked home after her shift, Lena paused outside a music store. She pressed her hand against the glass, looking at the grand pianos displayed inside. She imagined herself sitting at one of them, playing confidently, sharing her music with the world. For the first time in years, she believed it could happen. As she continued walking, she realized something important. Talent alone had never been enough. Life had been hard and opportunities had been scarce. But courage, the courage to step forward, even when afraid, even when unsure, had made all the difference. That courage had been sparked by a simple moment at a wedding. A moment she had once thought was embarrassing, now transformed into the doorway to her future. And for Lena, that realization was more powerful than any applause, more fulfilling than any scholarship, and more meaningful than any recognition. She knew that no matter what came next, she had taken the first true step toward the life she had always wanted. A life where her music could live, grow, and inspire others, just as it had begun to inspire herself. Lena's first day at the music academy arrived faster than she expected. She woke up earlier than usual, her heart beating with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The small apartment that had felt so comforting over the past weeks now seemed cramped and ordinary. Today she would step into a world she had once only dreamed about, a world of music, possibilities, and people who understood her in ways the rest of the world never had. She dressed simply, as always, but carefully. Her clothes were neat and clean, modest but professional enough to feel confident. She carried a small notebook, a pencil, and her sheet music. Her fingers tingled with anticipation as she left the apartment, walking through the streets of the city with a spring in her step. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the buildings and pavements. The air smelled fresh, with hints of coffee from nearby cafes and the faint scent of flowers blooming along the sidewalks. When she arrived at the academy, the building looked even more imposing in the daylight. The large doors, polished floors, and tall windows gave it a sense of history and importance. Lena paused for a moment at the entrance, taking a deep breath. She thought about the moment at the wedding, when she had played in front of strangers for the first time in years. That memory steadied her. She had faced attention and pressure before, and she had survived. This would be different, yes, but she could handle it. Inside, the academy was buzzing with activity. Students moved between classrooms, some carrying instruments, others carrying sheet music and notebooks. There was a hum of conversation, laughter, and occasional bursts of music from practice rooms. Lena felt a little overwhelmed but also inspired. Here, everyone seemed to share the same passion she had always felt, even when no one else around her understood it. Her instructor for the day, a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, greeted her warmly. "Welcome, Lena, we've been expecting you. Today we'll start with introductions and then move on to some basic exercises to see your strengths and areas we can develop. Don't worry, We'll take it step by step." Lena nodded, grateful for the calm reassurance. She followed him to a small practice room where a grand piano stood in the center. The polished surface reflected the light streaming through the tall windows, and Lena felt her fingers itch to touch the keys. She placed her hands on the piano gently, savoring the familiar feel. The keys were smooth, the weight just right, the sound deep and resonant. The instructor asked her to play a simple scale first, to observe her technique and posture. Lena did as instructed, letting her fingers move naturally over the keys. She felt the music flow through her smooth and steady. The instructor watched closely, nodding occasionally, making small notes on a pad of paper. After the scale, he asked her to play the piece from the wedding. Lena hesitated for a moment, remembering the performance that had changed everything for her. Then she began, letting the melody unfold naturally. As she played, she felt the emotions of the past weeks blend with memories from years ago. Her mother, the long hours of practice, the sacrifices she had made, and the joy of finally reclaiming her music. When she finished, the instructor smiled broadly. "Lena, that was beautiful. You have an emotional connection with the music that is rare. You don't just play the notes, you tell a story with them. That is the mark of a true musician." Lena felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of pride and relief. For years she had questioned herself, doubting whether she was good enough or whether her talent mattered. Hearing these words from someone who understood music deeply was like a balm for old wounds. Over the next few hours, Lena participated in a series of exercises designed to test her skills and understanding of music. She practiced scales, arpeggios, and sight-reading exercises. She learned new techniques for controlling dynamics, expression, and phrasing. The instructor offered gentle corrections and encouragement, always emphasizing growth over perfection. Lena absorbed every suggestion, eager to improve, eager to become the musician she had once dreamed of being. During a short break, she stepped outside the academy to catch her breath. The courtyard was quiet, with a few students sitting on benches practicing quietly or reading music. Lena found a small corner and closed her eyes, letting the sunlight warm her face. She thought about how far she had come, from a waitress serving drinks at a wedding to a student at a prestigious music academy. It felt surreal. As she returned to the classroom, she noticed a young man practicing in another room. His fingers moved skillfully over the piano keys, and he paused to glance at her with a friendly smile. Lena returned the smile, feeling a small sense of camaraderie. She realized that here, everyone was chasing a dream. Everyone had struggles and stories that had brought them to this point. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. The afternoon session focused on improvisation. The instructor asked each student to play a short piece without sheet music, using only their intuition and feeling. Lena's heart raced as her turn approached. She had improvised before in small private moments, but never in front of anyone else. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let her fingers move. The notes flowed gently at first, hesitant but gradually gaining confidence. Lena let the music reflect her thoughts and emotions. The joy of being here, the nervousness of performing, the hope that her life was changing. The melody rose and fell like a conversation, sometimes soft and reflective, sometimes strong and determined. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, then the instructor clapped. "Excellent," he said. "You have a natural sense of musical storytelling. That is invaluable. Improvisation is not just about technical skill. It's about expressing yourself honestly. And you did that beautifully." Lena's cheeks flushed with pride. She felt her confidence grow with each piece she played, each lesson she absorbed, and each encouraging word she received. For the first time in years, she felt her music could truly reach people, not just through practice or study, but through honest expression. After the lessons ended, Lena walked home slowly, carrying a small notebook filled with notes and ideas from the day. The streets were quiet, the sunlight soft and golden. She reflected on how much she had learned in just one day. Every correction, every suggestion, every encouragement had taught her something new about herself and her music. When she returned to her apartment, she sat at her small keyboard once more. She began practicing the techniques she had learned that day, experimenting with dynamics and expression. She felt a growing sense of ownership over her music, a sense that she was not just playing notes but creating something meaningful. Over the next few days, Lena settled into a routine. She worked her shifts at the restaurant, and in every free moment she studied, practiced, and composed. She started to write her own pieces, small melodies inspired by her life, her struggles, and her dreams. She experimented with harmony and rhythm, exploring the full range of expression her music could offer. She also began to notice small changes in her daily life. Her confidence grew, and she began speaking up more at work, interacting with guests more easily and taking pride in her appearance and demeanor. Even her coworkers noticed a difference, and she seemed lighter, happier, and more self-assured. One evening, as Lena walked home after a long day of practice, she stopped outside a small cafe. Soft music floated out through the open door, blending with the sounds of the city. She lingered for a moment, listening, and felt a deep sense of belonging. The world seemed full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, she felt ready to embrace them. Lena realized that the journey she had begun at the wedding was only the beginning. Her performance had opened doors she never imagined, and now it was up to her to step through them, to explore the opportunities that awaited, and to continue growing as both a musician and a person. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena thought about the path ahead. She knew it would not be easy. There would be challenges, mistakes, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had already faced fear, pressure, and uncertainty, and had emerged stronger each time. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine the future, playing in front of audiences who would listen not just to the notes, but to the story she had to tell. Sharing her music with people who would be moved by it, living a life where her passion and her talent could finally flourish. For Lena, that vision was more than a dream. It was a possibility, a promise, and a reminder that courage, persistence, and belief in oneself could transform even the most unexpected moments into a new beginning. The weeks at the academy passed quickly, each day packed with learning, practicing, and discovering more about herself. Lena woke up each morning with a mixture of excitement and determination. Her apartment, once just a place to sleep, had become a small sanctuary where she could retreat, practice, and reflect. Every key she pressed on her keyboard or the grand piano at the academy felt like a step closer to the life she had longed for. Despite the joy of learning, Lena also felt moments of doubt. Some of the other students had been training for years without interruption, and their skill sometimes made her question whether she truly belonged here. But every time she started to doubt herself, she remembered the wedding, the first moment she had dared to play in front of others, even when taunted and belittled. That memory reminded her that courage and heart could matter just as much as technical perfection. One afternoon, after a long session at the academy, Lena returned to her apartment to find an envelope slipped under her door. She picked it up curiously, noting that it had no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "You were amazing at the wedding. Keep going. Don't let anyone or anything stop your music." There was no signature, no explanation, just the words on the paper. Lena smiled, touched by the gesture. Whoever had written it didn't know her, and yet somehow their words felt personal, as if they understood the struggles and the triumph she had experienced. She placed the note on her desk where she could see it every day, a small reminder that her music had meaning, and that people were paying attention to more than just her mistakes or her past. The following week brought her first opportunity to perform outside the academy. One of the local community centers had asked if she would play at a small recital for young music students. Lena felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was her first real performance since the wedding, and the thought of stepping in front of an audience again made her heart race. She spent hours preparing, choosing pieces that would show her skill and emotional range. She practiced not just the notes, but the expression, the dynamics, and the flow that made music come alive. Her fingers danced over the keys, sometimes hesitant, sometimes confident, learning to trust both the technique and the feeling behind it. The night of the recital, Lena arrived early, the hall quiet except for a few last-minute preparations. Chairs were arranged neatly, and the stage was set with a single grand piano under a soft spotlight. She could feel her pulse quicken as she waited backstage, listening to the sounds of students practicing quietly, their parents and teachers chatting softly in the audience. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, her hands slightly trembling. She bowed politely, then sat down at the piano bench. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, letting the silence of the hall settle over her. Then she pressed the first key. The sound was perfect. Her fingers moved naturally, recalling the hours of practice and the lessons she had learned. The melody she had chosen began softly, delicate and reflective, carrying the emotions she had stored inside herself for years. As she played, she felt the audience lean in, listening not just to the music but to the story behind it. With each note, Lena felt herself growing stronger, more confident. She remembered her mother, the sacrifices she had made, the long nights spent practicing alone, and the small moments of joy that had kept her going. She let all of that emotion guide her hands. The music swelled and receded, flowing like a river, gentle in some places, powerful in others. When she finished, the hall was silent for a moment, the audience processing what they had just heard. Then applause erupted. Lena stood bowing again, her cheeks flushed, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and joy. Parents and students came forward to compliment her, some with tears in their eyes, others with wide smiles. Several young musicians approached, asking questions about her technique and how she had regained her skill after years away from music. Lena answered patiently, smiling, feeling a connection with each person who had been touched by her performance. That night, as she walked home through the quiet streets, Lena reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few months. From a timid waitress being mocked at a wedding, she had become a recognized musician, performing in front of audiences who appreciated her talent and her story. She felt gratitude for the journey, for the challenges, and for the people who had encouraged her along the way. The next morning brought another surprise. Her phone rang, and when she answered, the voice on the other end introduced itself as the coordinator of a regional music competition. They had seen the video of her wedding performance and wanted to invite her to participate. Lena felt a mix of excitement and nervousness again. This was a bigger stage, a more competitive environment, and the stakes felt higher. She spent the next few days preparing rigorously. She practiced for hours, refining her pieces, experimenting with new expressions, and rehearsing the transitions that would make her performance seamless. Each day she felt herself improving, not just in technique but in confidence and presence. She learned to trust her instincts, to let the music flow from her heart rather than just her fingers. The day of the competition arrived, and Lena felt a familiar rush of nerves as she approached the stage. The venue was larger than the recital hall she had played in before, with rows of seats stretching far back and bright lights illuminating the stage. She could hear the soft murmur of the audience as they settled in, the distant sound of tuning pianos, and the occasional nervous laugh of other competitors. When it was her turn, Lena stepped onto the stage, her hands slightly trembling. She took a deep breath, remembering the first time she had played at the wedding, the moment when she had dared to face an audience despite fear and mockery. That memory steadied her. She sat at the piano bench and closed her eyes, letting the quiet focus her mind. The first note resonated through the hall. Lena felt a wave of calm wash over her as her fingers moved across the keys. The music began softly, carrying emotion and story, flowing naturally from one phrase to the next. She played with intention, letting her heart guide her hands, not just her training. As the performance continued, Lena noticed the audience leaning forward, absorbed in the music. She saw expressions of awe, wonder, and even tears. She felt a deep connection with everyone listening, a sense that her music was reaching them, touching their hearts, and telling a story they could feel without words. When she finished, the hall was silent for a moment before erupting into applause. Lena stood, bowing, her cheeks flushed, her heart racing with exhilaration and pride. The judges smiled, nodding, and some even rose from their seats to show their appreciation. Backstage, other competitors congratulated her. Some were curious about her background, asking how she had started playing again after years away from music. Lena answered honestly, sharing bits of her journey: the wedding, the taunting, the viral video, and her recent studies at the academy. People listened, inspired by her perseverance and courage. In the following days, Lena received news that she had advanced to the final round of the competition. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The next round would be even more challenging, with more experienced musicians and a larger audience. But Lena also felt ready. She had grown so much in the past months, and each challenge had strengthened her resolve and skill. She continued practicing diligently, exploring new pieces and experimenting with expression and improvisation. She also took time to rest and reflect, knowing that balance was important for both her music and her well-being. Lena began to understand that music was not just about performance or recognition. It was about connection, expression, and the courage to share her soul with others. One evening, as she walked home after a long day of practice, Lena paused at a small park she often passed. She sat on a bench watching the sun set over the city. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool and quiet. She thought about how much her life had changed, from a waitress being mocked at a wedding to a musician preparing for a major competition. She felt gratitude for every step, every challenge, and every moment that had led her here. Lena realized that her journey was far from over. There would be more performances, more competitions, and more moments of doubt and triumph, but she also knew that she had discovered something essential: the courage to embrace her talent, the resilience to overcome obstacles, and the joy of expressing herself through music. And in that quiet moment, Lena felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. She knew that no matter what happened next, she had taken control of her life, reclaimed her dreams, and found a place where her music could thrive and inspire others. The day of the competition final arrived, and Lena felt a mix of excitement, nerves, and determination as she walked toward the venue. The streets were bustling with people, but she felt as though she were in a bubble, focused entirely on the music that had guided her through the past months. She clutched her sheet music, her fingers tapping nervously against the folder, and tried to steady her breathing. The venue was larger than any she had performed in before. Bright lights illuminated the stage, and rows upon rows of seats stretched far back. The audience was a mix of families, music enthusiasts, students, and teachers from across the region. The energy in the room was palpable, a hum of anticipation and excitement that made Lena's heart race. Backstage, competitors were warming up, some playing quietly, others pacing and muttering to themselves. Lena took a deep breath and closed her eyes, recalling the first time she had played publicly at the wedding. That memory, once a source of embarrassment, had become a turning point, a reminder that courage often comes in the most unexpected moments. She drew strength from it now, letting it steady her hands and calm her mind. Her name was called. The assistant behind the stage smiled encouragingly. "You're up next," she said. Lena nodded and walked toward the stage, trying to ignore the pounding of her heart. The stage felt enormous, and for a moment, she thought about stepping back, retreating into the safety of her small apartment, her quiet routines, and the life she had left behind. But she didn't. She sat at the piano bench, placed her fingers on the keys, and took a deep breath. She remembered why she had come this far: for the music, for the dreams she had once buried, and for the courage to follow them no matter the obstacles. The first note she played resonated through the hall, and Lena felt a wave of calm wash over her. The music flowed naturally, each phrase carrying her emotions, her story, and her dedication. She poured herself into every note, letting the rhythm, dynamics, and expression tell a story words could not. The audience was silent, captivated, leaning forward in their seats, as if listening to the music directly from her heart. She played the piece she had composed herself, inspired by her journey from waitress to musician. It began softly, delicate and reflective, then grew into a powerful, uplifting melody. Every note carried the struggles, the victories, and the hope she had nurtured along the way. She saw faces in the audience, young students, teachers, and strangers, all moved by the music, and it filled her with a sense of connection she had never felt before. As the final note lingered in the air, there was a moment of silence, a pause so long it seemed to stretch forever. Then the audience erupted into applause, clapping and cheering with such enthusiasm that Lena felt her eyes well up with tears. She stood, bowed deeply, and took a moment to soak in the recognition she had once feared, the applause that now felt well-deserved. Backstage, the judges smiled, nodding with approval. "That was extraordinary," one said. "Your performance shows both technical skill and emotional depth. You have a rare gift." Another added, "You've grown so much since we first saw you. Your music is authentic, powerful, and inspiring." Lena felt a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. She had faced countless fears and doubts, but now, in this moment, she knew she had earned her place. It wasn't about winning a trophy or gaining recognition. It was about embracing her talent, trusting herself, and sharing her music with the world. After the final performances, the judges announced the results. Lena stood among the competitors, her heart pounding as each name was called. When her name was announced as one of the winners, she felt a rush of exhilaration and disbelief. She had done it, not just because of talent, but because of courage, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to her dreams. The award ceremony was filled with smiles, congratulations, and photographs. Lena accepted her certificate and a small medal, but what mattered most to her was the recognition of her journey and the validation that her music truly mattered. She felt a sense of closure for the struggles she had faced and the mockery she had endured at the wedding. Every step, every challenge had led her to this moment. Later that evening, Lena returned to her apartment, exhausted but glowing with a sense of fulfillment. She sat at her small keyboard, reflecting on how far she had come. The journey had not been easy. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and uncertainty, yet she had persevered. The music had been her guide, her comfort, and her inspiration, helping her reclaim a part of herself that she had once thought lost. She opened her notebook and began composing again, letting her emotions pour into the notes. She felt freer than ever before, unafraid to experiment, unafraid to share her soul through music. The room was quiet, yet alive with possibility, as her fingers danced across the keys. Days turned into weeks, and Lena's life continued to transform. Invitations to perform at local events, small concerts, and community gatherings arrived regularly. She balanced her work at the restaurant with her music commitments, learning to manage her time and energy. She also deepened her studies at the academy, exploring new techniques, genres, and methods of expression. One afternoon, while practicing at the academy, she was approached by a young girl who had attended one of her recitals. The girl's eyes were wide with admiration as she said, "I saw you play at the wedding video online and then at the recital. You inspired me to start playing again." Lena smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she had never expected. "Keep practicing," she said gently. "Your music can touch others just like you've touched mine." This moment reminded Lena why she had chosen this path. It wasn't just about performing or recognition. It was about connection, inspiration, and the joy of sharing something beautiful with the world. Every person she inspired, every note she played felt like a step closer to fulfilling her true purpose. Months passed and Lena grew stronger as both a musician and a person. She discovered a balance between work, study, and life, learning to appreciate the small victories along the way. She also kept in touch with the people who had supported her, including the music academy instructors, her friends, and the strangers who had sent encouraging messages after the wedding video went viral. Their support reminded her that kindness and encouragement could have a powerful impact, even from those who barely knew her. One evening, Lena was invited to perform at a charity event for underprivileged children who loved music, but had few opportunities to pursue it. She agreed without hesitation, feeling a deep connection to the cause. As she played, she looked at the children in the audience, their eyes wide with wonder and excitement. She saw herself in them, a young girl with dreams waiting to be realized. Her music flowed with emotion, telling stories of hope, resilience, and courage. She noticed some of the children closing their eyes, swaying with the melody, completely absorbed in the performance. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming, but what touched her most was seeing the joy and inspiration on their faces. In that moment, Lena understood the true power of her music. It could heal, encourage, and ignite dreams. The event organizers approached her afterward, expressing their gratitude and admiration. They asked if she would consider mentoring some of the children, helping them develop their skills and confidence. Lena agreed enthusiastically. The thought of guiding young musicians just as she had been guided filled her with purpose and pride. As the months continued, Lena's life was filled with music, growth, and meaningful connections. She performed regularly, composed new pieces, and mentored young musicians. She also stayed grounded, remembering her beginnings as a waitress at that wedding, and the moment when a taunting comment had unexpectedly pushed her toward her dreams. She often thought back to that night. The nervousness, the embarrassment, and the courage it had taken to sit at the piano. What had felt like humiliation at first had been the spark that reignited her passion. Without it, she might never have reclaimed her music or discovered the path she was meant to follow. One evening, sitting at her piano in her apartment, Lena reflected on her journey. She thought about the obstacles she had faced, the moments of doubt, the support she had received, and the joy of finally embracing her talent. She realized that every experience, even the difficult ones, had shaped her into the person she had become. Resilient, confident, and inspired, she played a new piece, one she had composed for the children she mentored, the notes flowing freely, rich with emotion and meaning. As the final chord resonated, she closed her eyes, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. Lena understood that music was not just a skill or a career. It was a way to connect, to heal, and to inspire. It was her gift to the world, and she would continue to share it no matter what challenges came next. In the quiet of her apartment, Lena smiled. The journey that had begun with a taunting comment at a wedding had led her here, to confidence, fulfillment, and a life filled with music, purpose, and connection. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she also knew she had the courage, talent, and heart to face them. And with that thought, Lena turned back to the piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys, filling the room with music that spoke of hope, resilience, and the beauty of following one's dreams.